You are now listening to
Chakras and Shotguns.
Welcome to Chakras and Shotguns, the podcast that guides you on a journey of spiritual development and personal preparedness. I'm Mick, a marketer, energy healer, and prepper.
And I'm Jen, a former lawyer, yoga instructor, and human design reader. Hypnosis, manifestation, psychedelics, new age spirituality. These are things that can feel newly popular and mainstream, but did you know that our country's intelligence agencies have been trying to harness the metaphysical for at least a few decades? In today's episode, we're exploring the CIA's work in mind control.
Before we get into that, though, if you're loving the show and would like to further support us, please check out our Patreon. We have bonus content and access to special events. You can find the link to the Patreon in the show notes. All right, let's begin the episode as we always do with a little bit of meditative breath work to get us into a mindful place.
Okay, let's find a comfortable seat. You can always lie down and gently close your eyes. Rest your hands, palms facing down onto your body. Begin to check in, drop in, and find stillness. Inhale through your nose, expanding your belly, your ribs, your chest, and exhale that breath out through your mouth. Let everything go. Emptying yourself completely. Again, together, inhale in through your nose. Maybe allow yourself to even physically sit up straighter as you inhale. And exhale out through your mouth, maybe letting your body collapse and fully deflate. Let's do one more of those together. Inhale in through your nose. Feeling expansive, completely full. And exhale out through your mouth. Completely releasing, completely letting go. Seal the lips. Allow yourself to breathe in naturally. Try to match the length of your inhales to the length of your exhales. And allow yourself to ground. Do a body scan and just see where you may be feeling tight. You may be holding. And release where you can. Sometimes I'll find myself bracing a leg or maybe squeezing a little bit with my hands. Maybe your jaw is a little bit tight. See if you can completely let go. Focus your attention with your eyes closed at the space in between your eyebrows or your third eye chakra. Maybe you'll see colors, images, just allowing anything to come through as an observer. Visualize a ball of white light directly above the crown of your head. And allow that ball of light to gently expand and settle on top of your head as it continues to expand and engulf you in this white light from head to toe. Allow yourself to feel safe and protected by this white light. And that the light is for your highest good. Allow yourself to feel gratitude for the protection that is already a part of your life, as well as in this moment. Slowly allow yourself to become aware of the room, gently flickering your eyes open. Take another deep inhale and exhale. And we'll get into the rest of the show.
Thanks for that, Jen. Another dope breath work.
I was really going for protection of the third eye and the crown, since we're talking about mind control.
I love it.
And yeah, we're going to get into it.
We're talking psychic spies, mind control, sex and drugs, but minus the rock and roll. The CIA has been into the woo-woo and the metaphysical for quite some time. Hopefully, this episode doesn't earn us a little knock on the door from somebody from the CIA, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, Lord.
End up like Franklin Saint with the CIA all up in your business.
No.
I joke with my friends all the time that we each got a, CIA agent that's assigned to us with the file, keeping track of all the crazy stuff we be talking about in our group chat. But
oh, God,
we might actually have somebody coming through after this episode. So anyway, let's get into it. We're going to start with exploring the MK Ultra program, which Too Long Didn't Read was super shady. I do have a few trigger warnings for the listeners. This episode, we will talk about things that happen without consent, druggings, and sex workers, torture, and manipulation. Yeah,
this episode is not for the faint of heart. I started preparing for this episode and I was like, wait, what? Yes. And it took me down a whole rabbit hole and ended up being a twofer. So there will be a part 2 to the CIA and all the mess that they get into, because they're a messy bitch that lives for drama. Yeah. The MK Ultra program, this is the kind of stuff that makes you want to put on the tinfoil hat. I don't know what the tinfoil hat is for. Is it for electromagnetic waves?
I think so.
Okay, I don't want to get off task. But this is the kind of stuff that makes you put on a tinfoil hat. And Mick and I joke a lot about Pizzagate and QAnon and how people can get caught up in those types of conspiracies. Or lizard people. I used to work with a guy who was like super into that. I don't think I ever told you that.
The lizard people.
He was buying DVDs. Like, this is a whole attorney. And he was buying DVDs. He might be in QAnon right now. I'm going to have to check on him. But seriously, this is verified, true story, Senate hearings, Freedom of Information Act, like declassified documents. This is the real deal, Bill. This stuff very much so happened. Okay? And away we go. So we're going to set the scene. From 1945 to 1949, the U.S. controlled every nuclear weapon in the world. Remember, we had just dropped the atomic bomb in World War II, shortly before that, okay? So we feeling ourselves. We that girl, okay? It's like, don't come around here if you don't want that smoke. But then in 1949, the Soviet Union was like, baby, I got my own bag, okay? So they test their own nuclear weapon in 1949, and the U.S. is shook. We're just like, oh, fuck. And that starts the paranoia and all of the fear surrounding a Cold War, where we're thinking the Russians gonna get us. We're gonna have to get the Russians. We about to blow this bitch all the way up with nuclear weapons. So we've talked about the vibrations of emotions on the show. I can't remember what episode it was, but paranoia and fear, very low vibrational, okay? Basically, this environment, this climate, politically, so to speak, sets the stage for Project MK Ultra, which begins in 1953.
Yeah. So the program lasted for 20 years, which is wild. Like 20 years, I feel like is what we base a generation on, like the years that we kind of assign to a different generation. Like, So for a full generation until 1973, there was this illegal program going on in the CIA. And it was all intended to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used during interrogations to weaken people's will and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. There were approximately 80 institutions, so think universities, hospitals, prisons, and these were all testing grounds for this program, with only the highest people at the CIA knowing the full scope of the program. So, there may be some experiments going on in one part of the country, and as far as the officials at that facility know, they're the only ones kind of doing this. But really, it was widespread, right? They had psychedelic drugs like LSD and mescaline, which were used to manipulate individuals, and the drugs were administered covertly without the subject's consent.
Yeah, so let's dig a little bit deeper into that, okay? Only the top officials of the CIA actually knew what was really going down. They were the only ones that knew the full scope, the full reach of this program. So what does that look like? Maybe, hi, I'm a government official from the Department of Public Health or something. Is that a department?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
I don't know.
And we want your prestigious university to conduct experiments out of your prestigious university, and we're willing to pay you for it. And these are our esteemed doctors, highly recognized in their field. Like, there's no mention of the CIA in this at all, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like, oh, we're just going to be doing some psychological studies, but we needed somewhere to house it. And we felt that your resources and your university were the bee's knees. I feel like that's something they would say in 1953. So the university is like, hell yeah. Give me that shmoney. I want that government cheese. And they don't know that the CIA is in there running that joint. The people are signing up for these programs. I used to do psychology studies and stuff in college.
Me too, yeah.
For like $25.
It was good money back then.
Wasn't nobody giving me no drugs. I was like looking at people's faces and determining, who's ugly. I don't know. Whatever. But like, you sign up for one of these psychological studies, like, yeah, I don't have enough money for gas or to eat. I don't know. Back then, college was only like $30, so whatever. Next thing you know, somebody slipped you some acid. You're tripping, which I feel like if you don't know that you're about to trip, that shit seems wild as fuck. Like that sounds like, what is going on? What is happening? I'm having existential crisis. I'm freaking out.
So how many psychotic breaks that were diagnosed were actually the result of the CIA, covertly dosing people?
Exactly. And then I bet there was zero aftercare, because then I would have to tell you, hey, are you feeling kind of down? Are you feeling kind of crazy? It's because I gave you LSD. So how many people ended up in mental hospitals, which I feel like they just threw people in mental hospitals willy-nilly back then. How many people committed suicide, et cetera, because the government was like, I got to get this data.
That's crazy, bro.
So yeah, there's that. Then they're really into LSD. LSD was probably the biggest focus of the entire project. Like they were really trying to push LSD, but they were using other substances as well. At one point, the CIA says to itself, this LSD, I like it. What if we bought 10 kilos of it? And, I used to watch Power. I used to watch The Wire. 10 kilos does not seem like a lot. That's 10 banana breads.
Mm-hmm.
They look like banana bread, like little bricks.
I know where you're going with this.
Thank you. But apparently, that's enough for 100 million doses. 100 million doses. And at this time, the U.S. population was like 100 million people, 160 million people.
Mm-hmm.
And the Soviet Union, who we was beefing with, that was the Nicki Minaj star Cardi B. Yes, I'm making the U.S. Cardi B. DM me about it.
I got to edit that out. Barb's going to come for it.
The Soviet Union had about 200 million people. And these are both including children. So this feels like, why you need 100 million? Why you need that much? Why you need that much LSD for? What are you about to do? So then you start thinking about that. And then that makes you think about, I don't know if you've ever heard of this conspiracy, Mick, about there was a thought that the CIA put LSD into the public water supply.
So look, here I was thinking the worst thing that we had to worry about in the water supply was fluoride.
Or lead.
Well, lead too. But I think lead was more so like on accident. Like the pipes was lead and, well, maybe it was an accident. But my understanding is that, we do actually put fluoride into the drinking water. And the reasoning behind it was like, oh, we're trying to look out for dental health in America, which, I mean, do we really need it?
I feel like that's also very convenient because they do not do that in Europe.
And we see what British teeth look like.
Yes, we do.
So, okay. I could see both sides like Chanel. But there's all these studies about how harmful fluoride can be to brain development. And so I was worried about that. But like, to think that we could also be exposed to LSD. It's like me, you could be tripping right now. We have no idea because we just, took a shower with some tap water that got LSD in it and it absorbed through our skin.
I didn't even think about the skin because, I don't drink tap. I only drink spring water. I don't even drink purified.
Girl, you've been to a restaurant and had some tap water before. Don't act like that. We was just at lunch today and you had some tap water out that bottle. You think that bottle was some purified water? They went and filled that little glass bottle up to make it look cute.
Normally, I would have ordered some still. I said, this place probably filters their water because the pizzas were top tier.
I don't know if you can filter out LSD.
Wow.
So anyway, that's all I'm going to say. All right, well, let's, get back to the CIA. So even going back to the origins, while, the world was horrified by the Holocaust and World War II, the CIA was like, wait, there's some talent over there with them Nazis. So common knowledge at the time, apparently, was that the Nazis used mescaline on their Jewish victims in concentration camps without their knowledge and consent. The CIA was like, I like what you're doing. Come on over here. Get you this scholarship to come on over to America. They was recruiting them. And they got Nazi torturers and vivisectionists, which I didn't even know was a word until we started looking into this. Vivisectionists are people that experiment and conduct surgery on people while they're still alive. That just sounds terrible. It reminds me of the flayed man from Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So, yeah. It says conduct surgery, but yeah, like basically like they dissect people while they're still living.
So the CIA even brought Nazi doctors over to Fort Detrick in Maryland for them to teach our military how to use sarin gas. So you take what the Nazis were doing and you combine that with what the U.S. military was already doing in the Japanese internment camps. And yeah, you get this nice little gumbo that was a very dark project.
This is very anti-America. They're really tapping in. Shout out to Sweetie on me right now. Reading this, finding this stuff out, researching all of this, is very revealing on how much American propaganda is sugar-covered shit. Because in any history class that you have taken in any public school, it's like, oh my gosh, we saw what Hitler was doing over there and we just couldn't take it. They were killing all of these people and we just couldn't handle it. And so we did the right thing and we showed up and we ended Nazi rule. No, y'all were recruiting. It was an HR event. Y'all were actively over there like, and I knew that Nazi scientists were recruited and brought over here, but I thought it was like, oh my gosh, like, no, their technology is actually like really legit. And this is an amazing electrical engineer who happened to be a Nazi. No, y'all were like the darkest of you, the most evil of you. I gotta have you. I gotta have you. What's the compensation package gotta look like? We gotta get this guy.
Oh man.
How can we sweeten the pot? Draft his offer letter immediately. That is some very, very, very wild and very malicious and nefarious shit. And so it's very disconcerting that like America's always like America and freedom and liberty and apple pie and loving your neighbor. But if you're really, really good at victimizing people and killing them off, come work for us. So yes, CIA HR, U.S. government HR is working overtime to get the bad guys over here. Cool. But also, inside the office is the most toxic workplace that you've ever seen. Remember, everybody's accusing each other of being communists at this time. I think people's neighbors were being like, you know what? I don't like his haircut over there. He's a commie. He's a commie. It was the Red Scare. Isn't that what they called it?
Yeah, McCarthyism.
So what happens in the CIA? Like, who is more paranoid than the CIA? Like, the office is full of spies. They know stuff that regular people don't know. And there's always this fear that the Soviets are going to somehow implant a spy into the CIA because they look like white Americans. I was gonna say they look like us. They don't look like me, but they look like y'all. So they're worried about it. We used to watch The Americans. And what happens? Oh, you know what? I think Bill in accounting is moving kind of shifty. Somebody give him some LSD and let's see what's really going on. So people are like casually dropping LSD in people's coffee, like secretly dosing them just to see like, are you going to tell on yourself? You know, what happened to like taking somebody to the bar and maybe giving them like 2 shots too many and asking them some questions? What happened to in vino veritas? No, now we're out here dosing people. So one guy ends up getting spiked at the company retreat, at the CIA retreat. And then he ends up later dying like 9 days later from an apparent suicide. He jumped from a hotel window. The government is like, oh, he was depressed. You know, we dosed him without his consent and his knowledge. And I think he just had a bad trip and that just kind of sent him on a spiral. His family was like, no, he would have never have killed himself. And he thought that this project was mad shady. And he was like, this is morally wrong. And we're going to get into like some of the other dirt that they were doing under this project. And he's like, this shit is not okay. And so they did not let up. This happened in the 50s. And the family was adamant about this until 1994. And they exhumed the body and did a second autopsy. And he had injuries prior to the fall that were like not matching what a fall would look like. And the government was like, my bad. They sued the government for wrongful death. And the government was like, my bad. And they ended up paying them $1.5 million in today's money. So yeah, that's just like one story. And this is like one of their own.
Yeah. The CIA was also just playing around with us in the general public. They were setting up fake brothels in San Francisco, one of the cities, in an operation called Midnight Climax.
So I'm trying to.
Okay. I'm going to be asleep at midnight, so I don't.
What you say? You on your own?
You on your own over there. Better get that 10 p.m. climax. Basically, the CIA was luring men to these brothels, and then they would have the sex workers spike them with LSD or some other drug. And then after that, release, that post-coital pillow talk,
oh my gosh,
they would have the sex workers ask them a bunch of questions and see if they would reveal any secrets. Sometimes they would even do subliminal messaging on the guys and see if they could get these men to later commit robbery, assault, or even assassination. Like Winter Soldier?
Yeah.
They programmed him with some
stuff.
Oh
my gosh. Mind you, the CIA operatives are watching all of this go down through a two-way mirror. Is it two-way? One-way? Is it two-way mirror glass?
Bro, I don't know.
Anyways, they were doing, they was watching that shit like it's a Law and Order SVU behind their little glass or whatever. And did they need to? The CIA, they freaky. They didn't need to watch all of that. They could have listened in and been like, okay, they're done. Now let's watch. Like, y'all had to see it. They had to see it to believe it. Also, I was reading one article and the CIA was kind of frustrated because the LSD, like, they weren't really getting any results, but they like kept doing this. So they weren't getting enough results. But then they got the sex workers to just like after the act be like, hey, like, can we just talk for a little while? And the men were like, okay, like, you want to talk to me? And then that's when they started seeing more results. So it's like, was it the LSD or did you just inadvertently create a safe space for men to be vulnerable and let their guard down?
I'm sure the chemicals helped.
In addition to that, the CIA, they were also doing the drugs and they were also sleeping with the sex workers. So like the sex workers were working overtime and they weren't even getting paid. They were getting chits, which is 1950s, 1960s speaks for IOUs that they could then use to get out of jail if they were picked up later for like solicitation. So like,
is this where the monopoly concept comes from?
They were giving them coupons. They weren't taking them to were they feeding them? Were they giving them? They were just like, get to work.
That's crazy, bro. Yeah, the CIA was wild, and they was also dosing people in restaurants, bars, and beaches. It was just out of control. Other drugs that they used in addition to LSD and mescaline included marijuana, psilocybin, cocaine, and that heroin. They ultimately decided LSD wasn't worth it and it wasn't going to unlock any secrets of the universe, quote unquote. But maybe if they had their intentions right, they could have actually unlocked some things. If you remember from the episode that we did on psilocybin, episode 81, this is all happening at the same time that Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary are studying psilocybin and LSD at Harvard. And those two were able to discover quite a few positive effects of these psychedelics.
Yeah, so maybe the Lord knew the CIA's heart and they weren't able to really use these psychoactive substances the way that they wanted to, It was like, you're not using it for good, There was a lot more to this entire program. And like that brothel scenario, that was like for 10 years. So there were overseas facilities where they were torturing people off U.S. soil. They were using drugs, electroshock, assault, sexual assault, like very, very dark, gross stuff. And they just had this fascination with mind control and what types of tools of torture, really, because I think it's kind of like, oh yeah, you gave them like a psychedelic or you gave them truth serum, like what is it called, sodium pentothal or whatever, like, oh, you gave them this and you were able to get this information out of them. But it's like, if you're drugging someone without their consent, that's not very nice. And if you're using like sound abuse or what's it called, like it's like when you play like really loud sounds or really bright lights or you're waterboarding and like all these things, it's like You're experimenting on people to figure out what makes them the most vulnerable, the most weak, and will get you the information that you need to know. You're doing it all under the umbrella of national security. But I feel like there were some psychopaths and sociopaths that was like running this joint, right? Because of this fascination with mind control, there was a lot of thinking that the CIA was trying to create a Manchurian candidate. And if you're familiar with the movie came out in like the 90s, maybe the early 2000s. It actually, interestingly enough, was a book that came out maybe within 5 years of the program starting. So the book was initially published in 1959. So right when all this is going down. And the whole premise of the Manchurian Candidate was that they were going to have this person. At the time, it was going to be a white man because Obama wasn't around yet. And they were going to have this person who's going to run for president and win. That was going to be basically the winter soldier, like be able to be controlled and do whoever's bidding. So that was kind of this whole theory. And this book came out and everybody was like, oh my gosh, like what is this? You know, what could the government and the CIA be up to? Because nobody had really any idea at the time. And the thinking is that the CIA kind of let people run with that because that was so crazy that they could control this president. When really it was about how can we like break individuals down and interrogate them very cruelly, but more effectively and get into their heads.
Yeah, what's really interesting is, yes, a lot of what we talked about today came from government records. But we actually don't know everything there is to know about MK Ultra and what went down. The CIA was obviously very much incentivized to keep this under wraps. All the classifications, super duper classified, all that stuff, right? However, when Watergate went down with Richard Nixon spying on his political opponents, Richard Helms, he was like, yo, the block is hot. They looking into everything. He was the CIA director. He said, yo, we're going to shut everything down and destroy all the materials related to MK Ultra. So that really made it impossible to do a full-scale investigation, right? So about 20,000 documents survived, which is pretty small. We're talking about a massive program that was 20 years old at this point. So lots of stuff was lost. And really those 20,000 documents that we know about were only found because they were stored in the wrong record center. So Greg was down in the mailroom. He was supposed to put it somewhere else, and it ended up like in Mar-a-Lago in somebody's bathroom. And that's how we got the 20,000 documents.
I see what you did there. I think they just like filed it wrong. They were like, oh, this is supposed to go with the MK Ultra stuff. Or so they say. Who knows? Who knows what to believe? But there ended up being Senate hearings, and you can read about those proceedings in the show notes, like all of the details. It's like a very long document, but if you want to nerd out, go for it. President Ford ended up issuing an executive order prohibiting drug experimentations on humans without their consent. So they was like, that's a no-no. Presidents Carter and Reagan ended up extending this with their own executive orders to any human experimentation without informed consent being prohibited. So you can't be doing what would you do experiments on people, candid camera, undercover boss. You can't do that shit. Like the CIA can't do that no more. And they're not supposed to. There was also some stuff that went down in Canada. Like the CIA was like working with the Canadian government with this other doctor to do some stuff. And like the Canadian government fully knew about it. The Senate hearings went down in the 70s and Canada was like watching TV like, damn, that's crazy. And then like 10 years later, it was like, nah, we was doing that too. However, the Canadians, which I do feel like this is stereotypically on brand, they kept their records. So they knew who was victimized. And there were 127 people who were part of these experiments without their consent. And they each got $100,000 in 1980s money. I didn't do the math on that. But each person got $100,000. But remember, we destroyed all our shit. So we don't even know. Besides that one guy who worked at the CIA, who they said jumped out that window, that's kind of all we got that we know of for sure.
Yeah. because of the records, but they could have just been killed, right? Like, even the Canadians, I'm not letting them off the hook. Only 127 victims? How long was y'all doing that? Anyway, some of the documents ended up being declassified in 2001. If you want to read more about those, you can find them in the show notes. Also, quick side note, if you want to watch a terribly produced documentary that looks like someone made it on Canva, you can check out American Mind Control, MK Ultra on Tubi. Yes, I said Tubi, where all them terrible black movies are. I think they have a lot of movies in general, but I always see the clips of the bad black ones on my social media. So yes, check it out on Tubi. Me and Jen could only make it through half of it, but I mean, there was some good information in there, I would say.
But do you see how the lengths that we go for you guys? We watched half of it so you wouldn't have to watch any of it. Okay? We're on the front lines. We're doing God's work. Before we go, there are a few alleged subjects of the MK Ultra program that are a little bit spooky, especially when you're talking about mind control, subliminal messaging, trying to get people to commit assault, assassination, etc. So one of them, allegedly, the Unabomber. So while he was in college this is years before he was planting bombs and blowing shit up, he was part of a psychedelic psychological experiment that may have been related. Charles Manson, Helter Skelter, that crazy dude. He actually went to jail before he started his cult in California. And while he was in jail, I think for stealing cars, he was part of a program in prison. And then it was like once you got out of prison, there was like a follow-up program that he was part of in San Francisco, which is also where those fake brothels were. So he talked about how he was in some program and they gave him drugs or whatever. So, you know, I'm not saying it's causation, but there might be a correlation, you know, to what they might have been doing and what he ended up doing. And then there's Lawrence Teeter, who, unless you're like really a history buff, you don't know who I'm talking about. He's the guy who assassinated Robert Kennedy, and he was potentially tied to the program. However, here's a caveat. His lawyer said this. And so his lawyer might have just been trying to get him out. He was like, you know, he was part of this government program. And JFK had already been assassinated. There was already like a lot of swirling around that. This is JFK's brother. So his lawyer might have just been trying to like get him off and reasonable doubt and insanity plea or whatever. I'm putting my lawyer hat on back for a second. But he might have been telling the truth. I don't know.
You never know. You know, I even say the JFK guy, even the MLK guy, like it all could have been set up. It's certainly plausible. Well, that's really all we have right now on MK Ultra. We're going to follow this up with some more information about the CIA in the next episode. But what's the takeaway from today? I would say, as always, use discernment. Don't be like Jen and Mick and just sign up for any and all of the good paying psych studies in college. You know, read the fine print.
I was like, what did we do? Oh, yeah.
We just kind of jumped in. They could have been dosing us.
I don't know what was on that screen.
Getting subliminal messages, all kind of stuff. So, you know, have a little discernment there. And, you know, watch your drink. Don't let Steve in accounting slip some LSD in your coffee in the morning. You feel me?
I'll follow up with, as my grandfather used to say, don't take no wooden nickels. Can't spend them. It just means, you know, be shrewd, you know, pay attention. Don't fall for no bullshit. That's,
okay.
Yeah, that's what he was on.
You real country, baby. I love you.
I am. And here you are. Before we go, we do want to remind you to check out our Patreon. We have a yoga nidra session on there. So it's like kind of like a yoga sleep meditation. Very, very yummy stuff. We have stories about our past life regression sessions that we did with Marcy Barron. Those are amazing. As well as our experiences with the Caro indigenous tribe in Peru, getting our energy fields together. You don't want to miss out on that. So again, if you're interested, you can find a link to the Patreon in the show notes. And I know you're interested, so just click the link.
Well, it's almost 10 p.m. So I'll say finally, guys, if you're loving the show, please subscribe and give us 5 stars wherever you listen.
Namaste.